Hi there. So just to give you a quick response to your question about instancing and moving stuff around, essentially you've got a few options. So essentially, let's start by displacing the points. I'm going to be doing this on geometry objects, so apologies they're not clouds, but it will just run faster so I can demonstrate. So you've got option one, which is to displace the actual points themselves, which will move all of the objects like so. I think for a cloudscape this would probably not work. I mean, if we did like a really minor thing, like maybe, but you know, you can sort of see that this is so omnidirectional. Like there's no like rhyme or reason to how they move unless you were to be really specific in how you displace those points. Maybe you could get some parallax between the foreground and background, which could be nice, but typically if we look at a reference of clouds, they're fairly stationary. Like I don't expect this to move over here massively, so maybe you know that might not be the way to do it. The other thing you could do is you could, and I've just linked this slider to all of the offset of my noise in each sphere or each piece of geometry. If you were to offset this, you could do that sort of thing. Again, it's kind of got the same problem in that it's completely omnidirectional. Like you could have a little bit of something, but the downside of this is that it's going to be very expensive in terms of the amount of data you then have to process. If you want to go ahead and cache each cloud, that's going to be quite expensive, and it's going to take up a lot more memory than you would have done had you just had them static. So my guess is that it really depends on the shot you're doing. It's something, if we were looking out of a plain window here, this sort of scale, and I'll just increase the number of points. If we were looking at something of this sort of scale, then I wouldn't really expect anything to move. Like that would be perfectly acceptable as a result to me. If we're doing something a lot closer to ground, then okay, maybe then you start obviously looking at stuff moving a lot quicker, but it really depends what it is. I mean, this ambient hanging fog might be fairly static, but you might, I generally, when I do that, I'll take the camera frustum and I'll fill it with a volume and then add some noise and very gently offset that noise. I don't think it needs to be anything complicated. If you're looking at something like doing a big weather event, what you could do is do something like this. So what I've done here in this wrangle is I've basically created a density attribute, which if I just turn that into color so you can see it, like that. Essentially, I'm going to create my points and my instance objects in a certain range. So if I say here, turn on this density attribute, it's going to create all of the points. Let me just tell it not to bring the color through. So it's going to put them all out here. So if we look at how this works, okay, so this can all be static, and let's say you wanted to do something like a hurricane, you've now got the ability to use this empty space to put in your pyrosim or whatever you want, a big procedural setup. Depends again on the scale you're going for and how much movement's really required. But that would be my 2 cents on how you could achieve something like that. If you need to have a larger cloudscape with a weather event in the center, then you can do something where you're sort of instancing everything outside of that weather event and then simming on the inside. And then maybe you could do a little bit of displacement. So I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good way of doing it. If I put down a wrangle and I just say here at n equals the cross product of my position and an up vector, like that. How does that look? Where can I see that? This is why you don't do things live, Henry. Do I have to set this vector? Yes, I do. Okay, so let's say you had something like this, so it's all kind of whirling around, and let's say you had a big hurricane in the center, then you could potentially come in and this is displacing correctly. You could do something like this where you're, they're all kind of doing a little bit of a rotation here, but I wouldn't do much more than this, quite honestly. I would have this be very subtle, and you wouldn't want to go too aggressive with this. So maybe you want it almost stationary, but the tiniest bit of movement, I think, isn't the worst thing in the world. Obviously this has changed my my random rotation, so I'm going to stick that there, and then there we go. So now they can all do their thing like that. But again, you just got to be careful of how far away they go. So you might want to add some sort of fall off to this, so that they move quite up to that edge, and then the further out they get, they don't move as much. But that would be my 2 cents. I wouldn't add too much movement, just again because that reference, nothing is really moving. The main movement is coming from the camera and the plane. You can't see like any undulating shapes, and you can't see individual clouds offsetting from one another other than just through camera parallax. So yeah, that I would be very, very subtle in how you do that. But best of luck with the project. Hope it goes well.